Greetings and welcome to Know What You Are Leaving, a brief history of education in Western civilization. Few people would disagree that the government education system as we know it is broken, but there is less clarity about the root and cause of that brokenness and how to avoid duplicating that brokenness in our home schools. In this presentation, we will explore the true meaning and purpose of education by discovering how Western education first developed and later changed from its classical Christian roots to become what it is today, and what home educators can do to prompt authentic learning capacity in our home schools. Before we begin, it is important to differentiate learning from education. Learning is happening all the time in every aspect of our lives, from birth until death. In fact, about 60 to 80% of our learning is informal, meaning that it takes place outside of a classroom or formal education setting. For the purposes of this presentation, we are discussing the concept of formal learning within a K-12 education. To begin our discussion of formal education, we ask, what is education? Is it the filling of an empty vessel? If so, is there a limit to what can be learned? Does the recipient become full? Is it simply the transfer of knowledge or information from one to another? If so, how do we measure it? Secondly, what is the purpose of getting a formal education? Is it to prepare for college, to train for a job, to acquire soft skills like communication or time management, or to develop life skills such as budgeting or car repair? We know the government schools have it wrong and education has lost its way. Even as declining hard and soft skills plague the schools, they continue to emphasize the notion that education is nothing more than a transfer of information and a preparation for a job. As home educators, we know that education is much deeper than the passing of information or preparation for a job. But how do we produce true meaning and purpose in our home schools and overcome the shortages being experienced in modern public education? How do we find our true north? To do this, we will need to look as far back as 400 BC, ancient Greece, and the great halls of Athens. The Greeks gave us many things, from language to democracy, but most importantly, they gave us the concept known to them as paideia. Paideia simply translated is education or upbringing, but to the Greeks it was much more. It was the transmission of culture. The Greeks were theists and Greek society was democratic. They wanted to build a culture of meaning and sought ideals that would serve a higher purpose than just the government system. Prior to the Greek paideia, children were taught to obey and serve their rulers, and their training and upbringing were focused on learning a trade. As Greek culture became more focused on democracy and freedom as a pillar of a strong society, they recognized a better way to maintain that pillar was to teach men to think freely. Under the Greek paideia, men first learned how to wrestle with ideas and used logic and reasoning in order to think for themselves, and then they studied a trade to serve their higher interest or purpose. In order to educate free citizens, the pursuit of wisdom and reasoning superseded the pursuit of an occupation. This quest of educating for wisdom, not work, gave birth to what is called the liberal arts. Liberal because it created liberated or free-thinking human beings. These liberal arts began with grammar, logic, and rhetoric in the early years, adding mathematics, geometry, music, and astronomy as students advanced. All of these liberal arts were taught within a strong framework of wisdom, virtue, and moral philosophy, in addition to time spent in the gymnasium building physical fitness and athleticism. The 7 liberal arts were not subjects, they were integrated concepts working together. In modern education, we often describe the trivium subjects as the humanities, because they are focused on understanding the nature of man and the importance of his virtue. The quadrivium subjects naturally follow, for once you understand the nature of humanity, you need a strong knowledge of the created world in order to determine man's place and purpose within it. The Greeks contributed natural law, objective observation, moral philosophy, and the scientific method to the world, honoring man's unique power of logic and reasoning. Equally, the Christian church taught of an orderly, created universe, a creator who provides moral wisdom, justice, mercy, and truth, honoring individuals as bearers of God's image. Together, the best of both ideas united to form the classical Christian paideia. Logic and natural law from Greek reason, combined with the truth of biblical revelation, together became the foundation for Western civilization as we have known it. As America was being settled, this Western tradition remained central to the education system, with local community-based schools focusing on the pillars of faith, family, and freedom, educating free citizens of virtuous character who could think for and direct themselves as they built a new republic. Many are unaware that the early American paideia continued the tradition of a comprehensive moral and liberal arts education which was complete by the 8th grade, followed by skills-based apprenticeship or college training thereafter. Kindergarten was added in the 1850s but was not mandated until education became compulsory in 1918. Here are two examples of graduation exams from 1895 and 1910. The test included foundational skills in grammar, spelling, reading, arithmetic, history, geography, and science. Core skills were emphasized within the moral framework of biblical truth. In time, however, the American paideia came under attack. As America and the world became more industrial, educational movements were forming to move children out of the classical Christian paideia into one singularly focused on vocational training in order to fill a need for industrial workers. In the early 1900s, the progressive movement and people like John Dewey, an atheist and secular humanist, worked diligently to redefine the purpose of education, not as the transmission of culture and maintenance of a free society. No, the pragmatism movement sought a practical education focused only on the skills the students need. The changes being made to schools under their model was undoing the beauty and goodness of the classical paideia and transforming children back into servants of the state. By 1918, when formal education became compulsory in every state, the agenda to reinvent education was well underway. In order to make these changes, Christian values and prayer were removed or reduced to a single subject taught off campus. The study of history, along with logic and reasoning, was replaced with social sciences and social justice training. The goal was not to teach children how to think, but what to think. Personal responsibility and moral education were replaced with social-emotional learning. The significance of social-emotional learning is that nearly all of the social sciences teach that people are a product of society or social structures, not that people build societies and social structures. If you have been paying attention, then you know that this is a basic tenet of Marxist ideology. For every new idea that was added, something else had to be eliminated. In order to include all of their new training, the school day was lengthened and graduation was postponed until 12th grade. By the time education became federalized in 1979 with the creation of the Department of Education, most of the damage to the Western Christian paideia was already done. A moment ago, we mentioned the philosophy of social-emotional learning within the schools, which teaches that individuals are a product of societies and social structures. This sociological construct is a fundamental worldview populating our school boards and teachers' unions because it's what is being taught at the teaching colleges. Without biblical theology, they do not recognize man's fallen nature, but instead view him as a victim of society's injustices, not the author of them. Because of this, they believe that social engineering can perfect mankind, can make him good, and rid the world of suffering. This worldview is contrary to Judeo-Christian thought, which acknowledges man's inherent fallibility and understands that social institutions are shaped by the character of the individuals who create them. The individual under this worldview is spiritually dead and unable to change this circumstance unless redeemed by his Creator. This is why a Judeo-Christian worldview is essential in the classroom, because it focuses first on understanding the nature of man, spiritually, mentally, and physically, and then determining his proper place and purpose within God's creation. Within this worldview, man acknowledges that the best way to fix social institutions and societies is to first align the character of each individual to his Creator, with the goal of not repeating his mistakes from the past. These worldviews are at war within our public education system. One rejects and the other accepts the institutions created by God as stabilizing forces to the society. One worldview seeks to dismantle those institutions, and they are accomplishing this through the government education system. What can be done? How do parents and home educators prompt authentic learning and build capacity in our children as they move into an increasingly complex marketplace of ideas and have to face these competing ideologies? We begin by admitting that public schools are a threat to our faith, our families, and our freedom. Next, we acknowledge that education is much more than filling an empty vessel or transferring information from one to another. Education is the building of capacity to learn in our children by asking hard questions, wrestling with ideas, solving problems, studying fewer subjects but more deeply, and building rational, logical, and ordered thinking. Lastly, we must recognize that education's sole purpose is not to prepare our children for work, but to prepare them for life. Resilient, capable, and morally educated children will find their purpose serving God, family, and mankind. Every education will contain gaps, but if they know how to think and learn and are connected to a higher purpose, because the beginning of knowledge is wisdom and the end is action, they will pursue training and work that is meaningful when the time is right. How do we do this? First, we honor classical Christian paideia of education and commit ourselves to the transmission of culture and the embracing of truth, beauty, and goodness as central themes in our home schools. While public schools are busy teaching students what to think, we will commit ourselves to teaching our children and knowing how to think. We will establish a mission in our home schools and plan our days accordingly. Second, we collaborate within a like-minded community. Home education does not mean that we educate at home. Our students are educated in the world, not stuck inside a classroom. Home education means that educational leadership is directed by the home, just as public schools are directed by the government. As parents, we are responsible for the oversight of our children's education. This oversight may mean direct instruction on our part, or partnering with like-minded and trusted subject matter experts who respect and honor our authority as overseers. This can be accomplished within local co-ops and learning groups, churches, sporting activities, or courses from Christian schools, both live and virtual. Third, we will build confidence in our ability to direct and educate our children by educating ourselves. Having a growth mindset serves our families and ourselves. By engaging in our own skill-based education and training, like this one, we become better educators, we become better parents, and better human beings. As we become more resilient, capable, and spiritually strong servants of God, so will our children. Last, we will nurture our courage and stay the course. We begin with the end in mind, and we utilize every tool at our disposal to stay the course. We attend to our own mental and spiritual health to stay strong for our children, for our marriages, for our families, and for ourselves. We should be mindful that home educators are outliers and disruptors, and it requires strength to go against the norm. But with commitment, collaboration, confidence, and courage, we can push back against ideas that are counterproductive to the faith and health of our children, our families, and our society. Great thinkers and innovators have been produced in every culture and every era, but only free societies encourage free, innovative, and critical thinking. As home educators, we are in a perfect position to do just this. Thus, creating a classical paideia in your home is not just possible, it is essential. It begins with knowing what you are leaving, and then never looking back. Finally, brothers and sisters, we leave you with these words from John 16:33. These things I have spoken unto you, that in me ye might have peace. In the world ye shall have tribulation, but be of good cheer. I have overcome the world. Thank you for watching this presentation. We pray that it has been beneficial to you. If you or someone you know might benefit from becoming a part of a supportive online community of like-minded thinkers who wish to preserve Western civilization, consider joining the True North Homeschool Academy and the True North Navigators, a mom-to-mom discipleship community where you can find support and training to nurture your family homeschools. Thank you to all of these fine resources on classical education and more.